Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
Let me start here, though. In my business, we're laser focused on learning every detail and filling in every blank about a gripping true crime case. But sometimes in this process, our hearts just get broken all over again each time we learn something new. And so it is with the University of Idaho murders. Since the case moved to Boise with a different judge, we've seen a blizzard of unsealed, unredacted court filings and a regular supply of details and disclosures, even some bombshells. And tonight, two absolutely stunning revelations about the surviving housemates texting and talking in the wee hours of November 13th, 2022. Also, a rare peek into some grand jury testimony, something we don't often get to see. We knew that Dylan Mortensen, a surviving roommate, had texted an Uber driver just after 2 o'clock in the morning. That's about 2 hours before the murders happened. But now we know that she and three of her roommates, Bethany, Kaylee, and Maddie, all of whom had just arrived home from a night out, had actually contemplated going out again. The court document reads, and I quote, "At approximately 2 a.m., they met up in Kaylee's bedroom and talked for a while before going to bed. The fifth roommate, Xana Kernodle, who was out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, was not home yet. The roommates debated going out to the food truck for late-night snack, prompting Dylan to send a text at 2:10 a.m. to an Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving. Ultimately, however, the girls decided to just go to bed." Man, that brings to mind a lot of what ifs, doesn't it? What if they'd gone back out? What if they just decided, let's go, let's do it. It's 2 a.m. Let's go get more food. Might that have changed the course of history on that horrifying night? Of course, there is a good chance if they'd popped back out to that food trunk that they still would have been home before the knife-wielding intruder, allegedly Bryan Kohberger, broke in and killed Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan. But we will never know. And that brings me to the second revelation. We knew about Dylan and Bethany's frantic text messaging between 4:22 a.m. and 4:26 a.m. when Dylan tells Bethany that nobody will answer their phones and that she's afraid because she saw someone in a ski mask. And we knew that Dylan then ran down to Bethany's room on the ground floor of the 3-level house. But the court documents now reveal a brand new fact that we never knew. And it is, honestly, it is something horrifying. Again, quoting Dylan. Dylan again tried calling Kaylee and Xana, but neither responded. Dylan then exited her room and began running towards Bethany's bedroom. On her way, she noticed Xana lying on the floor of her bedroom with her head towards the wall and her feet towards the door. Dylan thought Xana was drunk. Once Dylan arrived downstairs at Bethany's room, they locked the door and both made additional unanswered calls to the other roommates. Hours passed, and at 11:50 a.m. the next morning, 6 minutes before the 911 call that you have heard on this program, Dylan called her friends Emily Allant and Hunter Johnson because she was too afraid to go upstairs by herself. And the court filing reads, Emily and Hunter met Dylan and Bethany at the bottom floor of the house. Together, Dylan, Bethany, and Hunter started to walk up the stairs to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Hunter went to the kitchen to grab a kitchen knife. Now, this next part is from Dylan's grand jury testimony. When Hunter came back out, Dylan said, quote, "She saw Xana again for a split second," and this is Dylan talking, "and just started bawling because she thought she had just like, I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and all asleep on the floor. Bethany also saw Xana lying on the floor." Hunter told Dylan and Bethany to, quote, get out. Emily, who had started up the stairs, also turned around after Hunter instructed her not to come any further. They both went outside shortly afterwards, and Hunter exited the house and then told them to call 911. He was pale, white, and mentioned something about someone being unconscious. You can hear a lot of that, you know? You can hear a lot of it on the 911 call. We just envisioned that the banging and the calling out, Xana, Ethan, was at the bedroom door, but it may not have been. It may have been down the hall and around the corner at the stairs. This is where I'm going to stop and bring in Steve Gonzalez. Steve is Kaylee Gonzalez's father. He's been a regular guest on the program. Steve, these were details that I found astounding. They seemed to put into place more details of a very confusing picture of what happened that night. And I often stop and I think about you and the other parents, and whether you get a heads up that this stuff is coming, whether you have someone who sits down with you and goes through it and helps you to sort through it. How do you receive this kind of information?
We normally get an email beforehand. We work back and forth. I don't think either party really had an understanding of how to really construct something where you can share information, but not too much information. But the communication's gotten a lot better. I've really grew to like these guys. I mean, I really care about that those people and all the work that they've done. So I think they've always tried to work towards communication, but I'm sure they're very busy, and it's not easy to always remember to keep us in the loop.
You know, it was a surprise to me, Steve, to hear this detail that Bethany got a glimpse down the hall of what now appears to be Xana's open bedroom door, and Xana lying inside that bedroom door, and ran downstairs to Bethany's room. And then at one point, Bethany also saw that same image. But it's sort of just, it's flummoxing to think that they called friends, they called 911 before anybody sort of went to investigate what was happening in that bedroom with the door now open. We always assumed that it was closed and they couldn't get past it.
Yeah, that's definitely a puzzling part of it. But I always assume, you have somebody who's scared, girl, slightly, intoxicated. My own daughter, when my son was playing a prank on her, acting like he was being attacked, him and his mom, Kaylee ran upstairs and hid under the bed and called me at work. So when people are scared, they're young. They don't think the same way as a grown adult does. And I think they were just thinking that something bad had happened, but they didn't want to believe it. They weren't really prepared to mentally accept what was happening. And I totally understand that, because it's not something that we're used to in Idaho. It's not something that is common. It's not even, it's just unheard of. So I chalk it up to that. And I know that there's a lot of forensic, and there's a lot, these girls had their phones on. I already said way back in the day that you could tell when they went up the stairs and downstairs. This is all laid out. Every step has been retraced. So it didn't make a difference in the bigger picture. And I've always said that there could be blessings for late calls as well too.
Yeah. It's also just so jarring to get the detail that the girls were all together up in your daughter's room, chatting about, let's all go out again, 2 o'clock in the morning, let's go back to the food truck. And I'm not sure if you heard how I laid it out at the top of the show, but all I can think of is the what ifs if they had actually decided to go. And I'm wondering how you're processing that information.
I knew a little bit of the details about that. I don't even talk about some of it just because I don't want to hurt some of the people, that are involved in this. If, certain people would have picked up phones, all those type of things, those are what ifs. But I think what it really goes to your audience is these girls were best friends. And even the last moments of my daughter and Maddie's, they were surrounded with friends and they were in their beds. So just keep that in mind, because there's going to be probably some people are going to try to drag these surviving people through the mud. And up to their very last moments, they were hanging out with these, the people who passed away, planning on doing something fun. And my daughter came down there to hang out with one of those girls, and that's the reality of it. That's the truth of it, not some of the speculation that you're going to eventually hear about.
Yeah, and shame on those who have cast aspersions on these two surviving roommates who have been to hell and back. They're still there. They're not back. And how anyone could set upon them with ridiculous conspiracy theories is beyond the pale. There was something that you mentioned, I think a couple of days ago in an interview that sort of stood out to me, and that was that I think you had a chance to speak with the coroner and got a detail about one of the injuries that your daughter suffered at the hands of this killer. I think it was a punch to the face. Can you tell me what it is that you learned?
I don't go into all the details on it because I want the court to bring it out. I want them to do it. But yes, I feel 2.5 years. The defense has a strategy to have everybody forget. And I'm here to make sure they don't forget. So when I do have to let stuff out, it's because I don't want people to forget that we have a monster. And yes, one of the girls was a little more intoxicated. He was able to go after that. Maddie May first, and my daughter woke up, and he struck her multiple times and broke her nose. And yeah, and there's a little bit more details to that, but I leave that to them in case that's something pertinent for them to know and to let them release it. But I'm not going to let anyone forget about what this monster did. And I'll leave it at that.
But they were able to give you that detail that that the killer killed Maddie first and then went after Kaylee second?
Correct.
I think there's a lot of forensics that we're going to learn in this trial. I hope you're going to be okay, you and Christy and the family, when it comes time for those testimony days. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Steve, is that you've learned that Bryan Kohberger called out from work the day after these murders. What do you know about that, and how did you hear this?
There's a thing called a Bryan tally I've heard about. I've spoken because I was vocal, because I came out. Some people reached out to me. This individual was an employee of WSU. And from there, I learned of some details. So, yeah, there was an investigation, an HR type investigation. And I don't know all the details about it, but I do know these girls felt very creeped out. They talked to people in power and they said, document it. And they started documenting it. And that's how we know that one of the days, the day after he took that photo where he was acting like he's, super confident and got away with murder. He doesn't look sick to me at all. You guys can look at, your audience can go look at it themselves. And I heard that's the only time you ever called in sick as well.
That's unbelievable detail. Steve, I always am very appreciative that you take the time to speak with us. I'm glad you keep your daughter's memory alive and the story alive as well. It's important that nobody forget what happened. Thank you again for this.
Yeah.
But let's start here. You cannot gauge a murder case by the sheer tonnage of the paper documents that it produces. But if you could, Idaho versus Kohberger really would be the trial of the century. Yet another metric ton of motions have just been filed or responded to, each one giving us another sneak peek at the main event, which is now less than 5 months away, the trial of Bryan Kohberger. We've been digging through all these documents throughout the day, and among the revelations is evidence tying the defendant, Bryan Kohberger, to the black balaclava mask that was spotted by a surviving housemate. The prosecutors say they have proof that Bryan Kohberger bought a black balaclava mask, quote, the same type of mask described by Dylan Mortensen, from a Dick's Sporting Goods store in January of 2022. That's about 8 months before the murders. And speaking of Dylan Mortensen, the defense is now attacking her description of a mask-wearing intruder with bushy eyebrows. The state says that is Kohberger she's describing. The defense says, well, that witness, that roommate, that surviving roommate, was influenced by the detectives on the case. And they point to the fact that she admits she was drunk that night when she saw a stranger walking past her bedroom door. For what that's worth. In the earlier filings, prosecutors brought up this. Yeah, this is Kohberger's purchase of a K-bar knife, which has never been found, and a knife sheath. That one matched the one found near 2 of the victims' bodies, and Kohberger's DNA, the state says, is on that knife sheath. But the defense now claims that his Amazon purchase and his browsing history that showed he bought a K-bar knife and bought a knife sharpener and bought a sheath, a K-bar sheath, well, the defense says that browsing history should be inadmissible because at the time he was living with his family and other users could have been doing the typing, searching, and the buying. They also say the knife and the sheath may have been part of a larger purchase with like camping supplies, including a tire inflator, a backpack, and bear spray. That is some good defense work right there. Because if you bought all those things, camping things, bear spray, tire inflator, backpack, and a K-bar knife in Pennsylvania, that would make sense. But if you can't produce that K-bar knife or the sheath or the sharpener, maybe not so much. Don't forget, he was also known to search, apparently according to the state, for a replacement knife and sheath. As for his medical conditions, we've got answers for that now too. His lawyers say that his developmental coordination disorder makes it impossible for Kohberger to be able to slash 4 people to death in such a short period of time. And the state has an answer for that. That a doctor says Bryan's condition was a thing of the past, something that hasn't affected him for many, many years. And whatever he's got left is like the fine motor skills, you know, little things, not big things. I could go on, believe me, but I'm going to stop here and bring in the best resource I can think of in this story, and that is our own Brian Enton. Okay, Brian, let's start with the balaclava. Again, you know, I couldn't believe it. Today, documents showing that they have the receipts. The state has the receipts for the black balaclava from Dick's Sporting Goods. However, if I'm the defense, I'll say this is Idaho. It is freezing in Idaho, and lots of people wear these balaclavas. Oh, and P.S., he bought it in January, in winter in Pennsylvania. I guess that makes sense, but it's really going to have to be add this to the mountain of evidence and see how the jury feels about it.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point that the defense likely will make. There was another just mountain of documents that were released late today that you mentioned that we're still going through. Reading the footnotes, a lot of these new nuggets, these bombshell nuggets are sort of buried in the documents, including this latest about the balaclava, which, by the way, just to be honest, I didn't even know what a balaclava was. At first, I was thinking baklava, like the Greek food, but no, it is a mask. You see it on your screen. That's what it looks like. It's similar to like something that we would wear skiing or that you'd wear on a very, very cold day. And the state got all of the records, got all of the shopping records, has the receipt from Dick's Sporting Goods, and says that Bryan Kohberger bought that on January 10th, 2022, 11 months before the murders. You mentioned it. He was still living in Pennsylvania, and that they plan to bring this in during the trial, Ashley.
So, you know, obviously question number one would be, that's fine if you bought the balaclava in Pennsylvania or if your family bought the balaclava in Pennsylvania, show it. Where is it? You know, if they have a black balaclava in the, you know, things that they seized from his apartment in Washington, that would be one thing, but I never saw one on the manifest, did you?
No, I do not remember seeing it on the manifest. Granted, a lot of new things continue to come out. It's possible that we just don't have that document because we didn't even know that the balaclava existed or was part of this until today with this latest document dump. I also think this is going to be really interesting, and I'm curious whether this comes up. Since he was living with his family, there's been talk of a shared Amazon account. So how are they going to prove who actually bought the mask? Because you mentioned, I mean, if you live in a cold climate, you know, could have been anyone in the family.
Sure, and I'm sure that anyone in the family wants to help his defense more than likely, so just produce the balaclava. And oftentimes, Brian, you know, detectives can do amazing things by matching certain fabrics with certain lots from that particular purchase. So they've got that purchase, they've got the information on it. Maybe they could go deep and find out if they do provide a balaclava, if it is the actual one that was purchased. I've seen that happen in trials before. And by the way, those are weird things to have. I never had one in my house until I married somebody who gets cold skiing and skis with one of those. But they are not every household has one of those, so they're unusual purchases. Speaking of that, go into that a little deeper, Brian, that the fact that the defense will say, Bryan Kohberger was living at home in Pennsylvania, and they were sharing, you know, Amazon purchases throughout the family. So you don't know who was doing the typing or doing the purchasing. And that would extend to the knife sheath, to the knife sharpener, right? And any other purchases that they find unusual.
And this may be one of the reasons we may see Bryan Kohberger's family members, his parents and sister, called as witnesses during the trial. This has been brought up in some of the documents. This may be the reason why. You know, there's been discussions in these documents that I've been going through about, well, if they get called as witnesses, they're not allowed to be in the courtroom before that. They may not be allowed to be in court during the trial because they're going to be witnesses. Why would they be witnesses? This could very well be the reason. The state may want to nail down, call them up under oath. Are you the one who ordered the knife? Are you the one who ordered the mask? And if they say no, process of elimination, they'll, you know, explain to the jury that it was actually Bryan Kohberger.
And also, I'll go one further, you know, Mr. Kohberger, where's the knife? Mrs. Kohberger, where's the knife and the sheath? Sister of Bryan Kohberger, where is the knife sharpener if any of you lived in the same house and were purchasing off the same computer? I think we're well past those days, though, for many people, where you're sharing a household computer. Most of us have our own accounts and our own computers. But I will give the defense that it's just produce the things that suddenly don't exist, that if a family member bought, I'm sure they would still have, you know, 11 months later. Okay, another question for you, and that is that the defense wants some of the, well, I think the entire eyewitness testimony thrown out, right, from Dylan Mortensen. There's a couple of things. They say that the witness was drunk. They say it was dark. I've seen lots of cases that happen in the dark. And that millions of people have bushy eyebrows, and that her characterization of a witness with bushy eyebrows shouldn't count. This was interesting, though, and I didn't know about this, and maybe you could explain it. They say that the detectives influenced Dylan's memories about the eyebrows and the balaclava. What's that about?
Yeah, and that's what they're saying. And let me just tell you that, because I read all of the filings, many of this back and forth is because the defense wants basically everything thrown out, it feels like, and they are trying everything they can and seeing what sticks. So I wouldn't read into it too much that they're trying to get Dylan's testimony thrown out, but they are saying, and she did several interviews, so it's a little confusing. It's not like she just talked to police one time, but the defense is claiming that it was police who introduced the bushy eyebrows first, and that then she went along with that. We don't know whether that's really true. And in terms of this mask, this balaclava, I don't even know if I'm saying it right. That's how I think you say it. They are claiming that they also told her about the mask first, and then she went along with the mask, so that basically she may have been coaxed into saying those things. We haven't been able to listen to the interviews. Again, there were multiple. We haven't been able to see the full transcripts, so we don't really know whether or not that's totally true.
You are saying balaclava, right? You are definitely showing the fact that you're
Okay,
from
good.
Florida. The rest of us live with those things from Canada. But it was interesting. We just had up on the screen what looked like a piece of paper with a drawing on it, a very rudimentary drawing. I'm going to ask our control room to put that back up on the screen. This is apparently Dylan's drawing of the mask that she said she saw him wearing. And as rudimentary as it is, it sure looks a heck of a lot like the balaclava that we were showing earlier as well. It looks exactly like that. So I don't know if the detectives coached her to draw that, but if she drew that before they mentioned balaclava, I think the defense has a tough row to hoe there, because that looks a lot like it. You know, even in your terrified state, if you're drawing that, that looks a lot like it. So the other thing, I was so fascinated when the defense brought up all these developmental disorders they say Bryan Kohberger has, OCD, autism, and then this other one, developmental coordination disorder. That's a DCD, developmental coordination disorder. And the defense made great hay about saying, you know, Bryan's got this. He can't possibly have the coordination or speed to be able to pull off the kind of murder that happened in that house. I mean, it was all of about 20 minutes or so, and they did the test. The police did the test. They parked, they ran from the car, they went through the house, they mimicked what the murders must have been like, and then they ran from the house and, you know, pretended to get rid of all the bloody clothes and get back in the car, all in the prescribed time frame. And the defense said his condition makes it impossible for him to be able to do that. And then came the state's response to that. Take it away, Bryan.
Yeah, and let me just read you this response because I think it's worth just reading word for word. I jotted it down here. This is what the state is saying that the expert that the Kohberger team said in relation to all this. To the extent defendant currently has any motor impairment, even according to his own expert, it affects only his fine motor dexterity and vulnerabilities in visual motion functions. The examples she uses for fine motor dexterity include when he had poor handwriting and trouble tying his shoes in the past. So the state is saying, wait a minute. All of a sudden, you have brought in all of this evidence that he's on the autism spectrum, that he's got OCD, that he's got developmental coordination disorder, something we hadn't heard anything about until recently. What does that really have to do with anything? And they're saying even your own expert is saying that it is saying that it wouldn't have impacted whether or not he would have been capable of these murders.
Yeah, that sounded like the air going out of a balloon, for the defense pretty darn quickly. Fine motor skills, picking up something tiny and putting it into a little bottle. Gross motor skills, jamming a knife into 4 people very quickly and running from room to room. And there didn't seem to be any problems with his gross motor skills. Bryan, great job. Thank you. I really appreciate you breaking that down. Keep your eyes out because those documents seem to drop at the most inopportune times. We appreciate this.
Yeah. Thanks, Ash. So the plan has been for Bryan Kohberger's quadruple murder trial in Idaho to start in 82 days, about 82 days from now, August 11th. In case you want to circle the date on your calendar, my plan is to go to Idaho. The families have been planning for it. Everybody's been getting ready for that day. But all of a sudden, the defense says that that is a problem. Team Kohberger now wants the trial delayed because of that Dateline NBC episode filled with all the details that had not officially been released. The judge himself has said that there were leaks. He's threatened to name a special prosecutor to find out who violated a gag order. That's a big deal. I was in court last week when he said it, and I was like, wait, what did he say? That is very unusual. He wants to go after the leaker with a special prosecutor right before the trial and do this whole investigation possibly. How will putting off the trial undo the damage that may or may not have been done from leaking evidence? Is the defense looking for any excuse not to face a jury? The answer to that is probably yes, because they've been trying everything. But will this actually work? I want to welcome back to the program Edwina Elcox, a criminal defense attorney in Boise, Idaho. We appreciate you being with us, Edwina. We're happy to have you because you are actually in Idaho. You know the players. You know the way the local system works. You know the reputation, and you know the judge. So you can really help us here. Do you think the trial is going to get delayed? I mean, you probably read this 40-page motion that just came out a little while ago.
I did read it, and I think, that's a hard question to answer, but I think if there is any reason that this trial gets delayed, and I do not think that Judge Hippler will make this decision lightly, but if there is any reason that this trial gets delayed, this is it.
This is what I don't understand, Edwina, and come to us from the criminal defense side of this. If they pick a jury that does not know the case very well, and they try to wean them out and figure out who are the people here that just know the basics and can be unbiased, and they seat that jury, why does it matter what was leaked? Why does it matter what was on Dateline?
Well, that's a preemptive question, right? That's assuming that they can get a jury that doesn't know this case, that didn't see the Dateline episode, didn't hear about the Dateline episode. And so I think what the defense is trying to do is say, look, we need some space and time at the very least to get beyond the Dateline episode, this James Patterson book that is apparently going to come out. And I think more importantly, and I think Judge Hippler's order absolutely comports with this theory, is to figure out who and what leaked this information, because it would be totally improper for law enforcement or an agent of the prosecution to do this in a criminal trial absent of a non-dissemination or a gag order. But the fact of the matter is this happened in flagrant violation of that court's order, flagrant violation.
And the way you say flagrant violation, when I was in court, it seemed to me like Judge Hippler was personally offended and very, very upset personally about this gag order being violated. I mean, what do you know about the judge? It seems like he really wants to go after who did this. Like, he seemed determined.
As he should be. Judge Hippler, practicing in front of him, he is a taskmaster. He is, as we expect judges to be, but extremely well-versed in the law. He expects both sides to comply with court orders, deadlines, to respect the decorum of the court. And the fact of the matter is, whoever did this, or if it's one person, multiple people, shame on them, because the fact of the matter is if this does result in the trial getting delayed, or ultimately what I think may be a legitimate defense request is whatever was leaked, that there is a request to the court that evidence be excluded. I mean, shame on whoever did this, because at the end of the day, who is suffering here? It's the families of those victims, right? Because they're left in limbo, potentially left in limbo again. And it's just simply not fair to them. And the court put this order originally, Judge, obviously we know that the case was transferred to Ada County and then subsequently assigned to Judge Hippler. But all of these were protective measures put in place to preserve the integrity of the prosecution and the criminal process in this matter, to avoid exactly what happened here. And so absolutely, Judge Hippler and everybody else should be outraged about this as well. It's awful.
I'm with you when you say these poor families, because they have to take time off work and they have to emotionally prepare, and they have been counting down the days to this date and made arrangements in their own lives and made hotel reservations and Airbnbs, and for them to be messed with on that emotional level, I just think is terrible. But I just don't understand, again, like, leaks happen. Most cases don't even have a gag order like this, big cases, and all this stuff gets out in the media anyway. Look at Diddy. Look at everything we knew about the Diddy investigation. They picked a jury just fine, Edwina. It just seems like, isn't the defense just looking for anything to slow this down?
Well, I think that the case law supports their position, and that 40-page brief lays out the case law, right? And I think that it is, absolutely the defense wants a continuance in here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But the reality is like their brief says, death is different. And you not only have to think about the trial, but also the appellate record and everything that comes after that. And protecting that record, and the prosecution absolutely has an interest in that. And so if these things aren't protected, you're going to deal with this at the appellate record. And do you want this to be sent back and the families have to deal with this all over again? No, absolutely not.
It'll be interesting to see what happens now. I'm sure prosecution will file a response, and then we'll hear what the judge has to say about it. Edwina L. Cox, appreciate you very much for coming on with us tonight. It's always nice to see you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. So what a day for true crime. If you're a true crime fan, this is a biggie. Might just be the biggest for the week, even though we thought it was going to be a snoozer. No, turns out in the Kohberger case, which is still 2 months away, what a bombshell. There's another eyewitness. I kid you not, I did not see this coming. I did not see this coming. Through a series of documents and body cam videos, it turns out there is a woman who was pulled over for a DUI. And during her interrogation, just happened to let it slip that she's one of the witnesses in this trial, that she's an eyewitness in this trial, was there that night delivering food for DoorDash, parked right beside Kohberger, she says. I know. I'm a little floored by it, too. So Brian Entin is on the case. He's going to join me in just a few moments to talk about what this means, especially since we know about it. There's such a gag order in this case, like the whole confluence of circumstances that brought all that information to light. Will it make a difference in the start date of the trial? Because there's a big hearing coming, right? There's a big, big hearing on a request for a delay. Is it going to be August or not? So Brian's on the case. He'll be with me in a moment. In the Karen Read case, not so much development, but more fear and terror and loathing in Massachusetts. God help me, are we really headed for another mistrial, another hung jury? And what makes this even worse is that it's seemingly because of all the same problems that they had the first time around. How is that possible? Yet that the millions and millions of dollars that are spent to try someone like Karen Read, when you have a mistrial the first time around, you do everything to make sure you don't have the same thing happen again. And we got a few questions today from the jury that sound an awful lot like they are exactly where jury number one was when they called it quits. I've got a member of jury number one who's going to join me tonight on the program. And then if you were watching last week, you probably saw R. Kelly's lawyer came on this program to say, someone's trying to kill my client, R. Kelly, in prison, and we want him out, and we want him at home under, confinement at home because we're afraid that he's got a target on his head. Whether you thought that was crazy or not, guess what happened today? R. Kelly was rushed to the hospital today. Excuse me. The news broke today that R. Kelly was rushed to the hospital on Friday. And the allegation from the singer is somebody poisoned his meds. So that lawyer is coming back on the program tonight to give me a few more details on all of this. Like, how about this? Like proof. All that coming in just a few moments, but let's start here. We are only 55 days away from the opening statements in the Idaho quadruple murder trial. And if you thought things couldn't look any worse for Bryan Kohberger with, the DNA and the cell phone data and the surveillance video and an eyewitness description of his eyebrows, at least, not to mention the laughable alibi. I like stargazing at 4 o'clock in the morning with my phone turned off. I know, I kind of thought that too, until what I heard today. A smoking gun that both sides somehow managed to keep under wraps for months. There is apparently another eyewitness. It's the DoorDash driver who delivered food to Xana Kernodle less than 10 minutes before Xana and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin and Xana's housemates Maddie Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez were all savagely murdered by an intruder. Police have confirmed to us that a woman seen in some of the interrogation footage from an unrelated incident is a 43-year-old woman known only as MM in the court documents. She was arrested that day for a DUI while being questioned at the Pullman, Washington police station. Just happened to reveal to the officers that she had to, quote, testify in a big murder case here because I'm the DoorDash driver, end quote. When the officer asks which murder case, the woman says, quote, the murder case with the college girls. I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Bryan there. I parked right next to him, end quote. And I think I need to read that last part again because I did a double take when I first saw it. I saw Bryan there, she says. I parked right next to him. That interrogation video was posted on a YouTube account where it was discovered by web sleuths and journalists. It's unclear, though, whether the woman's outing will affect the start date of the trial itself. The defense has been pushing for a delay for weeks now, but that's over the media leaks, the whole Dateline episode kerfuffle. And that is due to be the subject of a big hearing tomorrow. But the prosecutors want the trial to stay on target for the planned August 11th beginning. Our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, is in Boise, Idaho tonight with much more on what all of this means. First of all, I did not see this coming, a second eyewitness.
Yeah, this is a bombshell, Ashley. If it is true what this DoorDash driver is saying, then this is a bombshell. I came to Boise thinking that the hearing tomorrow was going to be the big story, but this is big. The Idaho Statesman was the first to break it today. Basically, this DoorDash driver, who we knew existed, by the way. We've known for a long time there was a DoorDash driver, that she goes by MM. She's been referenced in the court documents. We knew that she arrived there to deliver DoorDash at 4 a.m., about 10 minutes or so before the murders. But what we didn't know is what is in this body camera video. And let me explain this a little bit. You did, Ashley, but the reason we know about this is because last year, this DoorDash driver, totally unrelated to the Bryan Kohberger case, she got pulled over, suspected of driving under the influence. She had a expired tag, suspected of being under prescription pills, and she got pulled over, and she just started volunteering this information to the police while she was being interviewed, and it's on body cam. And she said that she's the DoorDash driver from the Bryan Kohberger case, that she saw Bryan Kohberger, which is really the headline here, that she's a witness who saw Bryan Kohberger, and all of this just happened to come out through this new body camera video from Pullman, Washington.
So, Brian, take us back to the house. But we're going to have to describe it because the house has been torn down. But if you look at the front of the house, there's a parking lot out front where all the cars were lined up, and they stayed that way till they were all towed. But this DoorDash driver said, I parked next to him, which makes me wonder if she's talking about the parking lot out front, or if she's talking about that side street off to the left where that bushy tree is, that big, tall, bushy tree is just adjacent to the red car there. Because there's a side street that goes up that left-hand side of the house, and isn't it
it's a very
believed that the killer used? Yeah. Walk me through that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There was someone talking in my ear. Yeah, it's a very, very important part of what she said. Not only that she said, I saw Bryan Kohberger, but I wrote this down. She said, I parked right next to him. Now, you think about DoorDash. We all order DoorDash. A DoorDash driver typically would park right in front of the house where they're delivering the food. They'd pull into the driveway. You see them in the driveway. They get out. They go to the front door. They give the customer the food. Why would the DoorDash driver drive onto the side street of the house, which with the murder murder house, you've got the front of the house, you've got the driveway like you described it, but then you've got this side road that goes up the side near an apartment building. You can't even walk down to the house like through, you'd have to go through the woods unless you walked all the way around if you went to the side road. We don't know exactly where Bryan Kohberger parked, you know, if he's guilty of all this. They've never said that in any of the documents. We know that he's caught on camera going up there and going up towards the house, but we don't know exactly where he parked. But if she's saying that she parked right next to him, does that mean that he parked right in front of the house, that he just pulled right in the driveway and then went in for about 10 minutes to commit these murders? We don't know, but it's certainly interesting to think about.
That's what I wondered. And then also, just with the pictures we're looking at now, again, I'm always so sad when I see those cars parked out front behind the yellow police tape, because it's sort of the vehicle's frozen in time from the kids who would never come back to use their own vehicles until their parents or their loved ones took those vehicles away. But it certainly doesn't look like there's a whole lot of room, which made me wonder if this DoorDash driver parked out front on the street, knowing, well, I can't go into this little parking lot. I'm just going to have to park out here on the street, which now would make a little more sense. If Bryan Kohberger did this, if he's really the killer, he might be surveilling from a little farther away, not so obvious, and out on the street. But that's the only thing I can think of, because as you said, going up that side road, it's really hard to get access to the house. As a DoorDash driver, you just wouldn't go up that side road to the side of the house.
Yeah, the whole thing up there is tight and confusing. The layout when you drive up there is very, very strange and tight. We would always have a hard time finding a place to park up there. There's a little bit of parking on the street there, but it's difficult. It's hard to get in there. So there's a place where maybe a DoorDash driver could have just pulled off without going fully into the driveway and like put their flashers on and run up with the food. But it's hard to imagine that Bryan Kohberger just parked right in front of the house. I have to say I'm a little skeptical of this whole story. Just the way that it came out through the body camera video, the fact that in all of the police documents that we've been able to see in the probable cause, we knew there was a DoorDash driver, Ashley, but if they had a real credible witness who saw Bryan Kohberger at the house, that is huge. How would we not know that by now? It's possible it's just like a bombshell that they're saving for the trial, but don't you think maybe that would have been in the probable cause, or in all these court hearings that we've been to where we get new little nuggets? I would have thought maybe we would have heard about that by now.
I can't believe that it wasn't even a whisper rumor. You're right, especially with all the reporters that descended upon the story, finding every DoorDash driver in town. I know that we tried to reach every DoorDash driver in town, but the problem is everybody, does side hustles with DoorDash. So it could have been anybody. And that was the problem with actually trying to find the person who did deliver the food that night. Okay, the question about this person in particular, MM, the woman in particular who's, told the police, I'm the one who's going to have to testify in this case. I'm the DoorDash driver. I can't imagine what it's like to be her, because she had nothing to do with any of this. I'm sure she wants nothing to do with any of this. Like, the stress and the frustration that this would have brought to her life, I'm sure, is unthinkable. But she also may have the credibility issues, especially if there's a DUI in play, or, drinking, and she seemed to say on the body cam, it isn't the first time.
Yeah, and look, I feel terrible for her too, Ash. I mean, the fact that we've confirmed she is the DoorDash driver, and she was there at 4 a.m. just minutes before this brutal slaughter happened. That's a hard thing to deal with, I'm sure, and I feel very, very sorry for this woman. But in terms of credibility, I've seen the body camera video. She's pulled over, she's crying, she's had DUI in the past. They take her back to the station. She's emotional, she's distraught. And she says, I'm the witness, and she's just telling this cop that I'm the witness from the Bryan Kohberger case. I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Bryan. I parked right next to him. I'm just wondering, was she was really the DoorDash driver, but like maybe she thinks that she parked right next to him, but it wasn't actually him. I don't know. I just think about the credibility. And I go back to the point that how is this the first time we're hearing this story, and it's through this means, through a body camera video that's totally unrelated of this woman in a very, very desperate situation after she gets pulled over for DUI.
So what do you think just in terms of this hearing tomorrow? Look, like you said, your focus was all about the Dateline leaks and how the defense is just sort of apoplectic about how this information got out from under the gag. Now there's this, and it's out there. It's not a leak. It's just, people put things together. Is this going to have an effect potentially on tomorrow's hearing and the issue at hand, which is a delay in the upcoming August start?
I don't think so. I suspect this will not come up at the hearing. I do think it's going to be a bombshell hearing. I think it's going to be a really interesting, juicy hearing. I think that the judge is going to have to hear both sides about whether they want to delay, and I think he'll probably make a decision because they've already filed their briefs with their reasoning. But what I'm more interested in is at the last hearing, Ashley, you remember, he talked about wanting to bring on a special prosecutor to do an investigation to sniff out who the leaker is within law enforcement and figure out who leaked that information to Dateline. I think we're going to get an update on that. Are they going to bring in a special prosecutor now to have, could there be criminal charges? Have they figured out who this person is? They may have even figured it out by now. I'm very interested in all of that, which is gonna come out at this hearing tomorrow, Ashley.
Have you been, and listen, everything in this case has been difficult to learn, but have you heard any rumblings of an investigation already? Like, have they been ferreting out who's spoken with whom? Have they confiscated cell phones and that sort of kind of, I hate to even suggest it, but asking people within the investigative circle, hand over your phones or we'll subpoena them and we'll search your history?
Well, we know that they asked everyone involved in the case and everyone in law enforcement involved in the case to save all of the records in their cell phones and emails so that they could go back and try to figure out who this leaker is. In terms of how the investigation has progressed, we don't know. That doesn't surprise me, though. This judge is serious, and he was serious before, and people were nervous to speak out before. I'll tell you, after the last hearing, I don't think we're going to know anything about that investigation. I think people are nervous, which is why I think it's going to be interesting tomorrow to finally find out what's been going on behind the scenes here, and will they in fact delay the trial because of this ongoing investigation into the leaker.
Wow. And then this weirdness that just sort of crops up the day before the hearing. Yeah. Okay, well, obviously, don't make plans at this time tomorrow night, Bryan Engen. You're the lead guest once we hear how the hearing goes. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for scrambling early to get that information up for us. I appreciate